So right after I had my experience, there was always this one angel around me. He was always standing over to my right. And I'm like, dude, come around here and like stop going over there. You scare me all the time. And it wasn't scared. It was more like, whoa, oh, wow, there's a lot of power right there. Yeah, when I hear someone ask, why do you work with angels? Why don't you work with God directly? That's kind of like me hearing them say, welcome to Living God's Light, a podcast to help you strengthen your spirituality and your connection with God. We are so happy to have you as a part of the Living God's Light family.
I have some really good energy this morning.
Yeah, what's going on?
Well, it might be my coffee, but but our guest Bubba is allowing me to read his book, and it's good, guys. It's really good. So he's allowing me to kind of test read it for him, and it's hitting good. So I'm excited for him to get through it and to see it come to fruition.
Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. I'm super excited about the day. So today, Donna and I were going to go babysit our new grandbaby.
Oh, you're going to babysit?
Yeah. Give them a break. It's going to be awesome.
Okay, wait. How many weeks now?
3 weeks, right?
3.5.
Yeah.
Good mama. I was like, I'm not leaving my baby that early. So good for her.
So Donna and I, we actually had to leave our first one just for an evening for like a week because we had a Air Force commitment, but there's no getting out of it. So it was a little heart-wrenching, but she needs a break. She needs some more sleep. So we're going to go and just take care of him for several hours and give them a break and a chance to. Yeah.
Oh, that's
so
awesome.
Excited.
How about you, Vinney? How you feeling? What's going on with you?
Feeling good. Feeling really good. Yeah. Doing some new work with angels this week. And it's pretty opening.
Okay. I got to know, with all of your 20 years of doing this, what does new work with angels look like?
Well, my brain, I didn't realize, had put a lot of fences around what I thought an angel was. And so they're helping me remove those fences one panel at a time.
Okay. That is a really good. So one of the comments / questions that people were asking on a previous episode, the one about how spirit shows up for you. Somebody said that they said they've noticed that a lot of people that have had NDEs talk about guides and angels, and some talk about God, although God's our creator. What is this with connecting with angels and guides instead of connecting with God directly? Which is something I had to work through, but I know we've talked about that before. But this is kind of new on the fences you put around angels. So tell me more about that, and then we can talk about.
Yeah, when I hear someone ask, why do you work with angels? Why don't you work with God directly? That's kind of like me hearing them say, why don't you deliver your letter and stop using the post office?
Oh, yeah.
Angels are the post office.
Angels are the post office.
Angels are the go-between between us and God. Because if God was to be here, even one energetic piece of God in true glory, if it were to be here, this place couldn't exist. So you have to work remotely and you have to use go-betweens. So there's all sorts of go-betweens. There's a lot more than just angels. So we have ancestors, we have guardians, we have what's called oversoul, soul collective. We have actually advisory boards for just our soul. So there's a lot going on there. And it is hard for us to understand when we're only looking at here. It is.
So you've mentioned before, and I'd love for you to share you described it as that freak out session when you were like, wait a minute, am I praying to angels?
Yeah.
To tell us about that.
So right after I had my experience, I noticed that there was always this one angel around me. He was always standing over to my right, and it bugged me because he kept standing behind me to the right. And I'm like, dude, come around here and like stop going over there. You scare me all the time. And it wasn't scared. It was more like, whoa, oh wow, there's a lot of power right there. And it took me a while to realize that he was there not just as like a protector and a teacher. He was there to really help me level up my experience now. And one of the first things he taught me was that he'd always been there my whole life. And I did have a really cool experience when I was under some severe abuse as a kid. I saw essentially a 2x4 explode as it was being swung at me when I was 6 years old, and I saw a white arm like go in front of that 2x4, and it exploded. It was so loud that neighbors both directions of our house like came out in their backyard. They're like, what was that? What was that? Everybody thought it was like a firecracker or firework. And I knew that was an angel element. I thought it was an angel. So I knew there was something around me. I also lived very, I don't know, I was very lackadaisical and not protective about my body when I was, getting into my 20s, just being very silly and not very smart with how I was, treating my body. And again, there was like almost like this confidence that I was going to be okay. And I didn't know where that came from. Even as I died, I knew I was going to be okay. I just didn't know why. And it was because these angels, they're, this one specific that's been around me my whole life. Well, finally, I was studying a Hebrew word right after I came back. Right after I came back, I had this voracious thirst and hunger for studying anything metaphysical or spiritual. Anything that I wasn't taught already, I wanted to learn. And in that process, I learned about the Michael. And the Michael is an angel that's talked about in the Torah, in the Kabbalion, in the Old Testament. Also, it's in Enoch too, in the some of the lost books. So it's like I learned that Michael or Michael is this angel that's been working with me, and so I started working with him. Then it was like 2 months into working with him by name, my ego came out and it started judging me. Like, how dare you work with an angel when you say you're a Christian, you worship God? Like, how dare you do that? And I think it was actually the angel himself that made me think that, because he knew that was a hurdle I needed to get over. And so I started asking him, like, what's going, like, am I sacrilege? Am I apostate? Am I bad because I'm working directly with angels instead of directly with God? And he said, Michael said, what's the difference between going to an apple tree and eating the apple, or going to the apple tree and eating the bark? And I said, a big difference. And he said, well, angels are the apples. God created them specifically for the work that we need. And that I could go and eat the bark, but I can't process the bark. So very quickly, I'm gonna have some problems, but I can still know that I'm at the tree eating the apple. And the angels are the fruit, essentially. The angels are the go-between between God and us. And it doesn't, people get all upset when I say this. So get ready, some of you. It doesn't matter the name you put on that God either. because I know I've physically watched Michael working with people of different faiths. There is no exclusivity on God's love for us. And think about it like this, okay? God's our parent, God's our creator. And think about your toddler. If your toddler comes over and calls you dolphin, does it bother you? No. You actually think it's kind of cute that they don't know your actual name.
Yeah.
And what name is your name with your toddler? It's mom or dad, right? But that's actually not even your name. That's their version of your name. So as a parent, as a loving parent, you don't care what your kids call you. You don't. And God is a loving parent.
Well, so we've been having a chat now that we're new grandparents. Our kids with this new baby are like, what do you want to be called as grandparents? And I'm like, well, the tradition I'm used to is whatever the first grandchild kind of settles into. That's just kind of the cute name that everybody else picks up. So I'm kind of interested to see what comes out of their mouth. So we'll see.
I love that.
All weekend long, you're going to be teaching them fighter pilot, fighter pilot, fighter pilot.
Oh, I could take my helmet, put it on. With that, one of the things, because I went through that same thing, I was like, okay, hang on. I'm and I still pray to God.
Yeah, me too.
But my understanding of how this all fits together, one of the other things that helped me realize this is, so something you talk about in the book and something that I've always believed is that this life is just one part of an eternal progression, for lack of a better word. And like our learning and growth doesn't end when we're done here. God didn't create us to just have a little bit of growth and then just be stagnant the rest of our existence. And while we're here on earth, one of the big things that we're here to do is serve each other and to love each other.
Mm-hmm.
And God has created this system where even, because so many religions believe in guardian angels. I mean, the Bible talks about, angels appearing and doing work. This is an opportunity for service and love and learning and growth for those that have passed on. You mentioned ancestors. They still have work to do, and we support and we help each other regardless. And this is, we're a big team here, and then our team is bigger than we can see, and then we've got more team on the other side, and we're still part of teams. We're still learning and growing, and it all relies on God. It's all because of God and what God created.
It's really neat too that God puts a sliver of source, a sliver of creation in every one of us. Mm-hmm. And where our creator smiles and feels fulfillment is when those pieces find each other.
Love that.
And when those pieces recognize each other.
So I do have a question. I'm sitting here thinking, man, that really cool story of Vinney and the angel breaking the board. But why have I never experienced something like that? Like, I know there's many, many people, we've never felt like that barrier's been crossed from the other side. And it's not like a why not me, boo-hoo. It's more of like, why has that not happened to me?
Well, if I tell you the whole story, you'd be thinking, oh, why Vinney? Like, what the hell? Why did that happen? And I'll tell you what led up to that is I was essentially, I was a little 6-year-old by the time, I made up for it since I'm a bigger guy now, but I was a little guy at 6 years old. I was starting to come into an average sized body at 6. And I had been essentially, I lost consciousness twice before that. One of the times my body had lost its bodily controls. In the second time I'd lost consciousness. And that just added to more reason why I was being beat. And that's why I know I saw what I saw. But I'll tell you the eerie thing for me is to, 30, almost 35 years later. No, actually almost 40 years later. 40 years later, I'm in the middle of an energy session working with angels, and all of a sudden everything just halts. And Michael comes from his normal position, and he comes around in front of me, and he like puts his what feels like his face down onto my face, and he says it's time to go back. I know what he's talking about, but I tried to pretend ignorance, and I'm like, back where? And he says, and he's like, you know where? We need to go back to where you saw your first angel. And it was rough. I was like, no, I'm good. I'm good. You guys are taking care of things with me. I'm good. You know, I died, so I already know the light. I don't need to go into that darkness of what that experience was. And he helped me understand the power of, you know, the yin and yang, that the yin, the negative, is what brings about the yang, the positive. And he said, for me, for where I was that day, I needed to go to that dark place. I needed to see what really happened with my spiritual glasses on, with my heaven eyes, and see that what I experienced was very different than what happened. And I needed to, number one, correct what happened in my mind. I also needed to understand there was a power there waiting for me if I could do this. And so I said, yeah, let's do it. And, you know, I started shaking. I was like crying. I didn't want to, but I knew I needed to. So Michael helped me get back there, and I'm watching this little 6-year-old ragdoll around, go in and out of consciousness. I won't go into any other details because it's really, really bad. And as I'm watching this happen, I'm like weeping outwardly as I witness this. And I see that 2x4 already landing once. And the first time wasn't as hard as this abuser could have gone. But this second swing, it was a full swing. It was going as hard as this human's body could swing. And that's why I'm like, Michael, come on, put out your arm. Put out your arm. And Michael goes, no, that's not my job. And then he had me like see me. I looked down at my presence, my spiritual presence. I was all dressed in white, and I realized it was my white arm that needed to go out. And so I put out my arm. I felt the crack. I like literally felt the crack of this board like exploding. And I realized that, you know, in this world, we get convinced that we need these outside saviors. We need these outside heroes. And that when we connect to heaven, we awaken that hero inside of us. And in the weirdest way, you know, hard for my brain to comprehend, that moment it wouldn't have happened without Michael there by my side. But he convinced me it was me that needed to save me. And it awakened something. It awakened something really, really big inside me, that I had been farming out my own happiness, my own salvation, my own satisfaction with life to the outside world in many ways. And that inside we have this divine self, you know, energetically dressed in white and pure, and wanting to be our true savior. And that's that piece of God, that piece of our creator in us. And, you know, I'm a big fan of Yeshua. I'm a follower of Yeshua or Jesus. I like using his real name. Yeshua was the epitome of that example. That he was coming to the world to be the solution that the world needed. And that was a big moment for me. So I'll tell you what, after that, I had no problem working with angels. I knew without a shadow of a doubt. I mean, I knew from the second that I got back from my experience, I could tell when something held heaven in it. And angels do. Angels are just a little Ziploc bag of heaven coming down here and working with us. Their whole functionality is just for us. They don't have a selfish desire in them. It's not possible. It's like it's something foreign to them.
Thanks for sharing that. I've got a question on that, but I want to say, first of all, Alyssa, that to answer your question a little bit more on that, I suspect we have things like that happen to us more often than we've ever known. Like Vinney
Yeah.
had this experience and then was taken back and went, I don't know, however many years or decades that was before that came full circle for you. And even then, you may not have the full understanding yet of everything that happened there. You've got great insights. But I suspect when we graduate out of this life and we get to see the full story, that we're going to be like, oh, wow, I had no idea. I had no idea. And part of it is just our awareness. Some of us don't. Like I went 30 years and didn't realize that I had a connection that now I recognize.
Yeah. On that note, I'll share a story from this past weekend, actually. And Vinney, I just want to say thank you for sharing that story. Like,
Absolutely,
holy moly,
thanks.
like the vulnerability, and man, like my heart wrenches for that 6-year-old little boy. But to see your story full circle, have you ever shared that story before publicly?
No, not publicly. I'll share it here and there in sessions.
Yeah.
With people, but really rare actually publicly. Yeah, I don't share it publicly.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing it. Like I see you in your story. I thank you.
Thank you.
So, my experience this past weekend. Okay, I think it's so normal to just like chalk up an experience and go, well, that was wild. But we were driving up north to go to, I call them crossover celebrations instead of funerals now. Because
I
it's
love
a beautiful experience now to me. So we're driving up north and we had to leave at night because our daughter had a recital and we needed to go to that. And so she performs and we leave, and totally unexpected, we hit, it's called Beaver Pass, and so much snow, like so much snow. And Josh is a little bit like, on edge, and he's driving, and we got to a point where he needed to switch driving because he was getting really tired and it was like dangerous that he was driving. So I switch and I'm thinking I can do this, right? Like I'll just I'll listen to Harry Potter. I'll just drive and it'll be all right. It was not all right. It was terrifying. I have never driven where the snow is coming right at you and you can see about 15 feet in front of you. And that is it. And I was holding that line. Like I was just holding the right line. Could not see anything. I'm driving about 35 miles an hour and I was terrified. But it was like the terrified that, looking back, I know I probably wouldn't have died. But in that moment, my fear was I was going to die. But it wasn't a fear in darkness. It was a fear that this could possibly happen. And God, I surrender to whatever is supposed to happen. Like I have my 4 tiny children in the back seat, got Josh, and I surrender to whatever your will is for this. I was so scared. And over and over again, I just kept getting like this idea. This was an idea that a team of angels was literally guiding our car, right? Like making sure the road was clear, just an idea. And I think it is, well, here's the end of the story. We made it through and it was okay. But I was on edge the whole night. Like it was awful. But I think put into practice the idea, maybe that's not your idea, right? Like maybe it is what is actually happening. And maybe you're not crazy, that maybe that team of angels is actually helping your car. it's our choice whether we want to like tap into that and believe it or not. And I know that I was telling people like angels were driving our car and how that sounded to some people, but to me, like that's just honoring that, you know what? Maybe it was one angel, maybe it was a team of angels. I don't actually know. But I choose to have faith in that because it gave me strength to power through. Then I could not stop. It was go and just get through it because there's literally nowhere else to go or you're going to get plowed by a semi, right? And yeah, it was really scary. But I'm here now and I'm fine.
We start building this perception that we're in control of our life.
Yes, we
And
do.
sometimes when things get out of control, we're like, oh, I got to hand it back to you, God. And God's over there like, what makes you think you had it? Like you've always been in my hands. Like, you know, like the toddler pretending they're driving. I'm driving. Sure you are. It's like, you know, the loving energy that is God is always got us. But then there is, I do want to bring this up. One of our, you know, Living God's Light family had a terrible accident happen about 10 days ago in Arizona. And the husband of this family was just driving his daughters to school. And there was a police chase ensuing on them. And as it approached, this stolen truck essentially wrecked into them, killing both the dad and one of the daughters. And it's a miracle that the other daughter is okay. I think she's getting out of the hospital really soon. Or she might have gotten out last night. I need to check in. But and then one other person too also passed away. But the car thief, the one who stole the car, barely had a scratch on him. And it's like, you know, you see things like this and it gets maddening when life like that happens. But when you can keep a heaven perspective, it does change things. It helps you through these tough moments. And when you have a knowing, and I have a knowing what heaven is, when you have a knowing of what heaven is, your suffering is different than before that knowing happens. You know, before a knowing of heaven happens, you miss someone passing or you grieve them passing. But afterwards, you still have that grief, but you have a form of it that has a little layer of like envy that they get to go before you, that they get to go to such an amazing place. And I do grieve the survivors, though. I grieve this with those who grieve, like my example, Yeshua would teach that we grieve with those who grieve. And yeah, it is hard to understand though sometimes, but in a case like that, why did the angels save one but not the other two? And you'd have to zoom out of the micro into the macro to really understand that. And sometimes in life, it takes us losing one hero for our hero to awaken and come and take that place. And many times that gives us an understanding sometimes why we would lose someone.
Yeah, and I you know, and I don't think it always requires a massive suffering. Like we can just start being curious about it and we can start listening to different sources and you know, things like this podcast or other ones that might be talking about spirituality in a different way. Like we can just have a curiosity that builds into a faith, that builds into a knowing. We don't have to have the massive life altering experience to actually then believe, you know?
Yeah. So I've got another question that comes to mind that I think is important to talk about in this context. So one of my kids has always been super spiritually sensitive, and he would talk to anybody that would talk to him. And so how do we, because we know that we also have, and we talk about this in the book, like the understanding the purpose of evil. We know that there are also forces that try to pull us off of that. So how do we handle that? How do we acknowledge that? How do we recognize it? How do we make sure we're only listening to voices? And then how do those temptations or how do they even fit into the whole scheme of things? Vinney, what would you say to that?
So I can explain what I do is as soon as I have any type of metaphysical experience or any type of spiritual experience, even where I'm recognizing an outside energy that is not me, is near me, the first thing I do is I check that energy. And in all of us, we have meridians. Those are physical contact points where our soul is attached to our body here. The bottom of where that connection goes is actually down in the earth below our feet. So our soul literally is quite literally anchored in the earth. The top part of that connection is just above our head. And so you have many connections to your soul there, right? And here's what I do is as soon as I recognize something spiritual around me, I will check the resonant frequency. Some people aren't going to understand that, but that's okay. You're not ready for it if you don't understand it. I will check the resonant frequency. I will check to where that frequency is resonating in me. And I know if it resonates in the top half of my being, because my resonation, where I resonate is about mid-tone or middle of the frequency, Jacob's ladder, right? That's where my frequency resides most times. It goes up and down, but I check to see if this spiritual energy is coming from above or a higher love energy, or is it coming from a lower love energy? Lower love energies could be actually fear, could be protection, but fear is a big one. But there's also an egoic energy on the bottom side of us. And egoic is to build a stronger physical life, a stronger physical career, stronger physical financial situations. Those are all lower energies. There is. So let me explain it without explaining it. Sometimes there's a deep-seated need to feel important in us, but it's not coming from a loving place. And you put someone in that place around a spiritual experience, they will experience that experience very different than everyone else around that's experiencing the same thing. They will experience it from the paradigm of I need love. And if we go out there broadcasting, we need love, we're opening a back door to our soul for just anything to seep in there. And it's important that we don't do that. We check everything that's happening to us. Is this coming from a higher love frequency, or is this coming from a need love frequency? And it's the crazy thing is it is love from both directions. But one direction, we misconstrue it, we misunderstand it, we misalign, we make big mistakes. But I do challenge that I can look at my own life where I was misconceiving something. When I zoom out, I see a huge growth, a huge lesson as I allow that misconception to flow through and for me to learn and to correct and to get back on track. So sometimes even our mistakes, though, or our misunderstandings about our spirituality, they end up rolling us in the right direction in the long run.
I look at it as especially with all those forces that kind of tempt us and try us. I see them as like weights in the gym. The way that we our bodies get stronger, the way our muscles get stronger, is from that resistance. And if that resistance isn't there, we just atrophy. But it's that spiritual resistance, that us having that desire towards God and towards heaven and straining away from these temptations is what builds our spiritual muscles. The whole reason God created this entire construct of us being separated is so we could have that learning and that growth, because otherwise it just wouldn't happen. And so there's a reason for it. And I've learned from you, and the way that I look at that resonant frequency, the way it conceptually works for me is, if it's coming from a place of love and gratitude, that's the direction I want to go.
Mm-hmm.
If it's coming from something that's not love and gratitude, it's probably not the direction I want to go. And so I start moving in the good direction.
I have people all the time say, I'm not going to work with angels. I'm afraid to work with angels because I'm afraid I'm going to get a bad one or a dark angel or a demon even to come in and work with me. And I tell them that's the same as being in the grocery store saying you're not going to eat anything because you're afraid you're going to get something you don't like or that's sour or bad. And that's fine. That's part of our role here. We get to choose what we do, what we embrace, right? And so I honor them in that. And I just say, when you're ready, and you start discerning yourself, what you know you need, or you think you know what you need, then let's go back to that, and we can revisit it and help you learn how to check if something is a source from a higher place or something is a source from an egoic place or a lower place. Because remember, the ego is very important. It's here to serve our bodies. And if we didn't have our bodies, then we couldn't have this experience here. So the ego is to serve the body, but here's the thing. That ego is very strong. It can take something real good and interpret it to be real bad quick.
I'm thinking, yeah, go ahead, Lynn.
Oh, go ahead, and then I had a thought to wrap it up.
I was going to wrap it up, so you're fine.
Please go ahead.
Well, I was just thinking how this is a big topic. Like, I'm sitting here thinking, Vinney understands this, but I don't think I understand this all the way. And correct me if I'm wrong, but it feels like a desire to know this is enough to get started.
Absolutely. It starts with intention.
Yeah.
It starts with intention. I was working with a lot of angels before I knew their names. And later, as I learned names, I'm like, you're the one, you're the yellow angel. That's right. You've been at this event. You helped me in that session. So for the longest time, I was working with angels before I knew their names, but they don't care about names.
Yeah.
And it's just like when someone says, what are my guides' names? And I'm like, what names do you want to give them? They don't care.
Yeah.
Where they are, they're in such a place of love. They want to assist you and help you and guide you. Come up with a name you like. Or if you really settle into your ancestry, think of an ancestor that just keeps standing out to you. And likely that's one of your guides. Yeah.
That's awesome. So go ahead.
I'm going to say, and it all, realize it all comes back to God. It was all created by God. God is the source of all of this. So you don't have to relinquish that to realize how the team structure that God created works.
Yeah, exactly.
I love
it. What I love too is there's been times where I will go and help someone unknowingly how I'm helping them. I'm running blind, following my intuition, and I go and help someone, and then I disappear from their perspective. And then that person is led to believe that I was functioning in some type of angelic capacity. And one time I was analyzing that, and I was like a little upset with God, like, why don't you send a real angel? Why are you sending such a low downgraded version of what an angel could be, me? Why don't you send a real angel? And that's when God spoke directly to me and said, what makes you think that I didn't send a real angel? He was like, how do you think you were receiving that perception of intuition? It was my angel. And yeah.
What makes you think you're not a real angel?
Sometimes I can be. Maybe for 3 seconds every year.
Whatever. Oh, this is really good. I think, if you feel called to come back, if, you feel like you need to digest this again, I invite whoever you like, if you're feeling it, come back and try and listen to this again, because wow, this was deep. So thank you so much. We will catch you next time.
We love you guys, whether you're angels or not.
Yep.
Love
you.
Thank you for joining us on the Living God's Light podcast. You can help keep the show going through getting merch at livinggodslight.com or contributing what you think the show is worth on our website or by going through Patreon. Thank you for sharing your light with the world. You are making a difference, and we love you.